Hello, and welcome to ProJam, the podcast where two sisters try to develop and pitch a board game concept in under an hour. I'm Miriam.
I'm Georgia.
We are Big Crow Games, and you can find us at Big Crow Games on Twitter, or see some of our creations on our itch page at big-crow.itch.io.
Welcome
I love
to.
this font.
I know, yeah, I've switched up the pen tip that I'm
Calligraphy
using.
brush, nice.
Exactly, I've switched to the calligraphy brush. I'm not sure how it's going to be for sketching, but I think it should still look quite stylish. Yeah, welcome to October. Welcome to another video episode.
Oh my god, we're here. It's autumn. It's spooky times. Yeah, like it couldn't come soon enough. Quite honestly, you're excited for hauntings.
I am excited to do haunting things. It's just occurred to me, is this going to be the October episode? Is this not going to be the 2nd September episode?
Yeah, we can. We can.
Look, spooky season can move forwards. It's like Christmas. Like Christmas starts in like early November now. Why are we not getting into spooky season basically the second that the first leaf hits the ground? That is what I want to know.
Kids turn up at school. They're all in like bleeding eye makeup, and
it's Monster High basically.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wasn't really gonna say anything. As you know, spooky season is my season. It is. It's also a season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. You know, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You feeling spooky at all yet?
Not as we record, but I dare say the spookiness is gonna come. We had a really lovely Halloween party last year with like some close local friends, and I wanna up the game and do like proper costumes and stuff, maybe.
I know. I was just saying to Andy this week that we need to do something big for Halloween because we usually go all out for Halloween. Obviously, the last 2 years have not been conducive, but it's time. My season is back and we're getting back into it. And you picked this month's theme.
Mm-hmm.
And the theme this month is
dream.
So did you have anything in mind when you were picking this? What sort of prompted you to choose it?
I was thinking, so basically I was thinking about the prompt nightmare, but that just felt a little bit like too restrictive maybe in terms of kind of where we could go with it. But dream has quite a like I don't know, I guess a sort of psychological sense and is a bit spiritual and whatnot without being too restrictive. There's some different ways we could go with it. Obviously, the last video episode that we did, we made quite a dreamlike game.
I was thinking that, like, so Miriam usually sends me like a list of possible options, and I said that dream was my favorite. And then afterwards I was like, oh, we sort of just made like a surrealist game. So I think we're going to have to maybe just try and sort of take dreams in a different direction. Should we brainstorm?
So what with the little bit of time thinking that I've had, a thing I'm sort of interested in is like perhaps making, a somewhat like hard strategic game, but one that is just a bit more kind of dreamlike in its feel, because it would be a bit more loose in terms of what sort of comes up. So like if you had a deck of cards in the game that was generating events or what have you, the things that were in there would just be sort of less thematically consistent and more a bit like what might come up in a dream, So I like the idea of maybe if it's a feasible thing to do, perhaps a strategy game, but one where a story or an imagination experience kind of develops as you play, just based on almost like prompts that are generated by the kind of random element in the game.
Something with emergent story.
Yeah, there we go. Did you have any thoughts off the bat?
I didn't have anything super concrete. I don't know. So we don't have Netflix in our household anymore, but everyone and their dad right now is watching Sandman,
Yes.
which is obviously sort of a very dream focused sort of narrative.
And a thing that you're like a long time big fan of.
Yeah, I don't want to say I was into it before it was cool because I was into it long after it was cool.
Well, it
But
was
I was,
kind of cool from the get-go, right? Like it just
yeah,
existed as a cool thing.
but yeah, I have all the books, and I sort of something about them that sort of ties with what you've talked about is that they're sort of both about dreams, and they follow this very sort of dreamlike logic, and they go in new directions, and they have those sort of strange left turns. Uh, so I quite like that. I think the other thing I was thinking about is dream in the sense of like ambition.
Okay, yeah.
You know, some that there's something that you sort of want to achieve, maybe,
Hmm.
uh, or something that's sort of like out of reach.
Yeah. Okay. So these I'm interested in yeah, like doing something that might be closer to a strategy game while like retaining a really like nice loose kind of dreamlike feel. I think that would be
You
interesting.
keep
And
saying loose, and it makes me think lucid.
haha, yes. Um, yeah, I guess, but loose, I'm just kind of like, a lot of times we enjoy a game that really like ties its theme to its mechanics and that has a lot of like the themes really like woven into the game. And I
Mm.
guess I'm just imagining something that would have a lot of theme, but that like you could follow quite a different sort of imagination path each time you played it. Um, uh, yeah. I guess that the we would still need to sort of work out what we might be doing with the game itself because a lot of this still does sort of just boil down to like thematic stuff. I like the idea of an ambition thing, like maybe uh there being some kind of like yeah, like out of reach sort of ideal or objective that you might be heading towards by playing.
This sort of all feels like vibes, and I wonder
Mm.
if to find out where we're going. I don't. Should we start the timer, or do we think we're still brainstorming?
Um, I think we can start the timer. I don't
Okay.
want to cheat too much.
Yeah, and also I feel like when we delay the timer, we end up running very long in the episode, even if we don't use the full hour. So
Yeah.
something that I think it might be good for us to do within the timer, but before we really get into game design, is maybe just like brainstorm a little bit more about like what happens in dreams or what makes something dreamlike.
Um, I guess like the quality that I feel that dreams have is sort of like moments of quite like intense certainty that you have a strong memory of later on, and then the very loose connectivity between that and like the next moment of clarity. It's like yeah, like there's one moment that's a very strong memory and visual, and you have this certainty that like so and so was there, and then the next thing you remember, you're not sure if it was them, and you'd moved to a different location, and yeah,
Yeah, disconnected, not knowing how you got to where you are.
yeah,
There's a very sort of classic dream thing of like, oh, I was with you, but it wasn't you.
yeah,
What would I call that? Ambiguity?
yeah. Um,
What else makes something dreamlike to me? So I think that both of us have quite an interesting relationship with dreams. I
mm,
don't know how much you want to talk about this, so I'll talk about my own situation, which is that I am a near 100% lucid dreamer. I nearly always, if I remember a dream, it's because I knew I was dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
I'll become aware that I'm dreaming it. I can't necessarily control it, like control what happens, but I can at least control what I do, and I know that I'm dreaming. But until that moment, I'm sort of carried along by the dream, but I'll usually sort of come to lucidity.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's probably similar. I have a lot fewer dreams now than I did in the past. I have like a sleep condition, and the medication that I take just kind of like shuts down that dream stage to a certain extent. But I naturally I have quite vivid dreams that at least on like a mental level have quite a strong sensory element. It was the first time in ages, but somewhat recently, I had a very scary nightmare, and my idea in my head was I was able to feel the extreme pain that was going on in the dream. I think when I wake up, I'm always a bit like, okay, that's not exactly what pain was like, but you know, a lot of pain is just mental and psychological, right? So like the horribleness and scariness was the same.
Yeah, I think so often when I have a nightmare, the thing that was scary isn't something that would be scary in real life.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's something sort of very interesting about that. So I feel like there's lots of ideas here. I'm interested to know if any of these ideas, particularly to you, speak to anything that sort of maps onto anything in gaming. So, for example, like control is an idea that to me does map onto gaming. Like
Yeah.
there's decision making and
Hmm. And I was thinking about perhaps just because of like some of the games that I've been like working with just today, but like multiple locations, like having you know, like a tile-based map or something,
a
and kind of
tile-based
like
map in a big
time
pro game.
you yeah, I know, just blow your mind over here, but I don't know, something where there's like sudden shifts between locations, and it's not like initially clear.
I
Um,
like that word shifts. I think
um,
that's something that's very relevant to dreaming. You said about how in a dream you'll sometimes have a moment of certainty, and it did make me think about something that happens when you're playing a strategic game. Like I'm not very strategic, and I know that you play more strategic type games than me, but I don't think you think of yourself as a particularly strategic person either.
no.
But you know, when you're doing it, and say you look at your hand of cards and you look at the board, and you're suddenly, you do have a moment of certainty where
Mm,
you sort of you think, oh yeah, like I know what I'm going to do, and I know that that's the best move for me right now.
mm.
And then you do also sometimes get that thing later where you think, oh, was that right? Or is that how I
Yeah, yeah.
remembered it?
You're like, oh my god, I'm gonna do this, and then you'd get like two cards in, and you're like, wait.
I like
um,
the idea. I mean, obviously, yes, we love to do a tile based map, but something you could do with a tile based map and a dreamlike theme would be have the map change or move.
yeah. So,
Um,
have you played Forbidden Desert? I think I've probably brought it up
I
on the
have
podcast
I
before.
have played Forbidden Island and I have played Forbidden Desert. I'm quite a big fan of the Forbidden series of
Mm,
games. So in Forbidden Island, which is the one I've played the most, the tile-based map can change state. So an area can either be safe or it can be underwater,
yeah.
or it can be gone. And I think that's a bit of a constant across the Forbidden series of games.
Yeah, the nice thing about Forbidden Desert is you have the like sand mechanic where the sand builds up on the tiles, making them like impassable. But you also have the storm, which is a gap in the middle of the map. And every turn, basically, you're going to draw a card that tells you to move some tiles into that space.
Ooh.
Um, so that's quite interesting for the dreamlike theme, and also the fact that well, like with both games, but in different ways. Like in Forbidden Desert, the tiles start sort of face down, and all you can see is sand, and then you're going to discover what's underneath them. Um, yeah, I was actually sort of thinking about. I started imagining that because Forbidden Desert is a game I work with like all the time, And then I was imagining, because you were talking about control, perhaps some way for players to like build connections between tiles, but maybe the connections would be sort of thematic. So again, Forbidden Desert has a mechanic where there's tunnel tiles, and once you've turned over two of those, you can move between them as though they were adjacent. Um, but yeah, I guess I started imagining something that would be a bit like that, but that you would sort of choose to create those connections, and you would like, I don't know, in some way mark them on the map, and then that's like these two spaces. I have the ability to move between them more easily.
I do. I like that. And this conversation has prompted something which I think is a very Georgia idea and which is either going to take us completely like off in the direction we're going to go with this game, or it's going to be a complete blind alley. So if you don't like it, just shut it down because I don't want to lose 40 minutes to it.
Yeah.
What about if movement in this game is only by moving the map around? So rather than moving your meeples on the map, you move the map with your meeples on it. So it'd be like a cooperative strategy where you're kind of dreaming the world. Maybe you can also get moves that let you do things like you said, like form connections between two separate tiles. But you're never sort of like picking up your meeple and moving it one adjacent tile.
Yeah.
You might instead like slide a tile from one side of the map to the other.
Yeah.
With a meeple or meeples on it, or with an object that you need to get to on it or something.
I think that's an awesome idea. It's also prompted me to think of a game that we have, which I got from like the library cuts, and which I've only played once. It's called Dingo's Dreams, and it's like a sort of, I think it's like Australian animal themed and kind of like vaguely dream time in sort of aesthetic. And yes, it is that. It's like a sliding puzzle game. It's not you don't necessarily have a character or objectives, but everybody is basically trying to get their map to match a certain pattern, and every turn you have one tile like extra to your grid, and you basically slide it in one way and like take the furthest tile out the other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's a bit of like a proven concept. I think what I'm describing is a little bit different to that.
Yeah.
I feel like it's sort of halfway between that and Forbidden Desert, almost. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if this is not imaginative enough because it is quite like the plot of Forbidden Island. But I was thinking of something where maybe a team of you have perhaps like set roles like you would in Pandemic or another type of collaborative game that let you make particular moves, and then maybe there are also cards that let you do things, and there's like an objective you have to reach or like a certain number of things you have to collect, and then you know that's how you beat it, but you do it by sort of changing the map and the world in this dreamlike manner.
I suppose question, if most of the movement is by sliding the tiles and there's not necessarily a lot of like tile to tile movement with pieces, then what makes it dreamlike when you're changing the map? Because I guess like I can imagine like moving the map and one thing shifts to be next to something else, but if there's no actual like geographical connection between those two things, then we need the dreamlikeness to be much more visually indicated. Is what I'm saying making sense?
Yeah, it's making perfect sense. So I think there are ideas that we can go to beyond this. I'm wondering whether I should keep this slide up or if we should move on to a new brainstorming slide.
Well, we've still got it, haven't we?
So... Yeah, we've still got it. So, well, before I move on, one of the things I was going to say is I wasn't just thinking about sliding tiles. I was also thinking of like adding, replacing, switching places, maybe flipping upside down to reveal a second side, you know, like lots of different ways that you could interact with this map tile. And then I also like the idea of maybe certain tiles being connected to one another. And maybe there is, like, for example, this is just like completely off the top of my head example, but let's say that there is a type of player role that can move to one adjacent square. That's their ability.
Yeah.
But then another player has the ability to do other things to do with manipulating the tiles. So it could be about getting the right tile next to that person, or it could be that that person like moves their way across the map to do something.
Yeah.
But you could also have maps that tiles at different points on the maps that connect to one another, maybe through tunnels, you know, like color coded tunnel entrances, as an example, or something more dreamy than that.
Okay, that's like very interesting. I thought, and I think could be, in theory, a super interesting cooperative experience. It's one I guess it's quite hard to like know for sure as we talk about it in abstract that it would really work. It could even be that the ability that the like fact of different players having these different abilities could even be a bit overpowered. Like if like one person has the ability to swap to or something, like that could potentially be very strong, and in combination people's abilities could be like very strong. But then again, like that's just a thing you could balance with the level of the challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just thinking about the idea of this as a cooperative experience has made me make a note saying a shared dream, you know, which is a bit of like a concept that I think persists a lot in a lot of like human cultures. Like, I think all of us have at one time or another thought about whether we all go to kind of the same place where when we dream,
Yeah,
and things like that. And I feel like that really kind of feeds into the idea that maybe even though it's a cooperative experience, you can't like directly interact with other players, if you see what I mean. You couldn't like, for example, I keep going back to it, but in Forbidden Island, you go to the same tile as another player, you can hand them off an artifact. And I feel like that wouldn't be something that you'd be able to do in this, because you can only like change the world around them to try and facilitate. You could leave something for them and move it to them, but you couldn't hand it to them, kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna brainstorm to some things which I don't necessarily like all things that we could include, but maybe one or two or several.
Go ahead, my note-taking hand is ready.
Could be a silent game, or like a limited communication game where you may not talk. Like for example, they're sort of rare in the co-op sphere, but Magic Maze does that. Could also be that as well as having your shared cooperative objective that everybody knows what they're doing, because you're all in slightly different dreamscapes, there could be an element of like each person having a secret thing that they just need to do during the game, maybe something quite simple, but like you only all win if the shared goal and all of the individual goals can be done.
I wonder if you could use that secret objective, thinking again about the player roles that let you do something. Maybe every player role has a starter ability that's quite weak, and then like a lucid dreaming ability when they realize they're in a dream. But to realize you're in a dream, you have to achieve your secret objective.
Yeah, okay. I think that's quite an interesting idea. I would, if we were doing that, I wouldn't want to also have the silent play, because I feel like if you're meant to be working together, it obviously in that version is strategically beneficial for somebody to be going after their like private thing, but you could end up in a frustrating situation where two people are just sort of working at odds, or like keep accidentally bumping one another off what they're trying to do, and you don't get any closer to the shared goal.
Yeah, I think we've done quite a lot of limited communication ideas, or we've pitched quite a lot of limited communication ideas, and I feel like what I like about playing a cooperative strategy type experience is the ability to talk each other through what you're going to do and sort of plan a few steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So I am more in favor of full communication.
Yeah.
I think.
But perhaps with the caveat that like
you don't talk about your secret objective or something.
Yeah, and like you're still in charge of your turn, so even if everybody's saying do this, you can be like, okay, no, I'm going to do this though.
Yeah. Player autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, anyone who's played Pandemic with an experienced player knows what it's like to get quarterbacked and how much that isn't fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would definitely want to do something that sort of doesn't facilitate that.
Yeah.
So what kind of thing, what would be the shared goal?
So I guess there's various sort of things that you could be after. I feel like I don't want to do something where it's just sort of a sliding puzzle and you're trying to get like an image to show up on the board.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. Like, I'm fine with it not being that, but that's quite cool.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, but potentially would sort of limit replayability because either you would have to have like just like one or two or three images that could be the objective, or you would have to have like a lot of different sort of maps in the
I wonder if you could have a really simple, say like 2 or 3 tile version of that be a secret objective.
Yeah.
Like if the snake appears, then you gain your secondary ability and you can do the sliding or the placement to do that, and then that would facilitate you to be a more useful player to the shared objective.
Mm-hmm.
But it wouldn't be the whole point. It would just be like a little side quest.
Yeah. So that could be a small side quest, but what does our goal look like?
I am a bit wary that everything I'm pitching, because I really like Forbidden Island, I don't want to pitch Forbidden Island, Forbidden Brain, like Forbidden Sleepy Time. So even though I like the idea of like collecting things, like that feels kind of simple and could fit in with the dreamlike idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested in other things that you do in dreams, whether it's like overcome fears or have fights.
Yeah. Okay. There could be something along the lines of like
revelations.
There's that if all the tiles are double-sided, you could have something where the objective looks like just don't have any of a certain color showing or something like that.
Okay, so like remove things from the board.
Like remove them by flipping tiles or by removing and replacing with other things. That could be something. But I'm thinking about what are things that you often feel that you need to do in a dream.
Usually in a dream, I need to get somewhere.
Right, yeah.
And often where I need to get to is really confusing,
yes.
or unclear, or I don't know why I need to get there, or this is quite a common trigger for me realizing I'm dreaming. There's no reason for me to be there because I no longer go to school.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, usually in my dreams, I'm trying to go somewhere, or I quite often have dreams about trying to save people.
Yeah. I get somewhere is definitely a common one for me. And then I never quite get to the point of, oh, I need to save somebody. I just get to the point of like, oh, this person has an awful thing happening and there's nothing I can do.
Very often in my dreams, someone or something very precious has fallen into deep water and I have to chase it down.
Oh God, I can remember you telling me about a dream in which I'd like fallen in the lake. And yeah.
I feel like save people is quite a common motivation for people in dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Or, prevent something bad from happening. I think it's a very common dream feeling of like, there is something that is giving you dread, something bad is going to happen, and
Yeah.
you're sort of powerless to stop it. And I guess this game sort of asks the question, like, if someone else was there in your dream helping you, would you be more able to stop it?
Here's a question, and I think we may want to like just say no to this, but I'm going to bring it up. What if the objective is you all need to save each other?
Okay. Oh
Like
no, I love it. Oh, it's so
not
meaningful.
necessarily like everybody has their own like target person that they have to save, but just like you can't save your own meeple, and so the team needs to collectively like do a symbolic thing on the board that means that person is safe.
I absolutely love that. I'm writing it big. So what would that look like? There's a simple version, I guess, which is like moving their meeple to a place of safety.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe a version where you occupy the same space as them and help them to calm down, or you bring them something they need.
I I'm imagining you want to do something that like is less related to the tiles and more related to their particular figure. I feel like the thing I'm sort of imagining is kind of like a reverse use of the sand markers in Forbidden Desert. Like maybe what if the water is rising like in an imagination space, and what you need to do is just like get three little like platform tiles underneath each meeple so that they're like standing above the water kind of thing, or like something like that.
I do like that. I mean, there's another idea which is maybe a bit tedious, but like the way that you actually are safe from a scary dream is by waking up.
Okay.
So whether that's something, but I quite like the idea of just like shoring other players up.
Mm-hmm.
I really like kind of the spirit of this.
Yeah, it feels in the same vein of you all need to save each other, like the concept of like for somebody else's peace you've like raised them up one level, like as you're making them safer, but you're also like it's sort of like an empowering image.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other thing I was maybe toying around with in my head was that if we were going to have different, so every player having some special ability or role, whether there is also that role comes with a save condition. Like,
Okay.
whether you save different, like it might aid replayability maybe for smaller groups if you had different roles that people could play and you had to save them in different ways.
I definitely like that there being different roles, because it gives like it that's what part of what really interests me about this idea is using your different like abilities together. And there's it's sort of a bit more like closely mechanical than some of the other times you come across that multiple role thing, where it really is just like one person has the ability to slide tiles, and one person can swap tiles, and one person can form like the bridges that connect tiles. And
Yeah, I wonder if there should also be some shared moves that everyone can do, like maybe everyone can add tiles or
okay,
something. Like
yeah,
I don't know, but I quite like the idea of it not being limited to a particular size or shape. Like you could maybe end up with a dream that was very long and thin, or one that was a square, or one that was, quite even disconnected maybe, but you can hop between them using portals.
oh yeah, that's quite fun. Yeah.
Like generally in the Forbidden games, I think the shape of the map is fixed
Yeah.
until it sort of starts degrading, but its shape at the start is fixed.
Yeah.
Whereas I could see this starting quite relatively small and branching out, or maybe even starting with each player on an individual tile and they first have to build towards each other. So like you start separate and then you have to join the dreams.
Okay, interesting. Let's put a pin in that because we've already got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, sorry.
But I'm going to put it in my notes. I'm just making notes in my phone so I can kind of remember what we've come to.
Yeah, at the moment I've just drawn a pin without writing down what it is that we're pinning, but I trust you to know what we're getting at. So I feel like we have the big idea, but what we don't currently have is much that feels very mechanical.
Uh-huh.
So let's change gears a little bit and start thinking about mechanics. What can you do in this game? What are some of the mechanics we want? We know we want player roles.
Mm-hmm.
We know we want map tiles.
Yeah.
We know we want no direct player interaction.
Yes. That's quite I love that in the like dream theme as well. Like if you needed to pass an object, you have to like leave it in a space and somebody else has to come and find it. That's just so much more
Yeah.
dreamlike than here you go. um
Something that I wrote down on a previous slide, and I think I might even have said it out loud, but I kind of want to emphasize it as like the idea that keeps, or the phrase that keeps bubbling up in my mind is dream the world.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, that the
Like you make it and change it through dreaming.
yeah. Um
I'm
So
gonna
we've already mentioned some of the different like abilities that we think that the player roles could have.
do we want
And
to sort of sketch some of those out a little bit more?
uh
So we talked about moving tile to tile.
yes. Um
We talked about swapping tiles, swapping, flipping. We also mentioned the idea that these might have a leveled up version
yes.
when you
I think
when
that
you
would
start lucid dreaming, quote unquote.
yeah, I think that would tend to be just a bit like usually a bit more numerical, like,
Yeah, you can move 2 tiles instead of one. You can flip 2 tiles instead of one.
yeah.
Anything like that. I think that really works thematically, like in that you can, when people who are really good at lucid dreaming, like who sort of actively practice it, can just completely change the world that they're in or decide that they can fly or just disappear the bad guys with a click of the finger. I definitely can't do that. I just know that I'm dreaming and that's about it.
Yeah,
But
I know. Whenever I try to actually change anything or do anything in a lucid dream, it ends up like sometimes I can make it happen and then I'll like get some sort of like feedback like, oh, uh-oh, that made it worse somehow.
yeah. So I like the idea that the leveled up version is just like you can still interact with the world in much the same way you could. You can just do it more effectively.
Yeah.
We think the map tiles are going to have 2 sides.
Mm-hmm.
We think they might have like a puzzle element.
Yes, potentially for some of the like private objectives that people might have.
Yeah, I like calling those side quests.
Yes.
We also think that there might be ways of connecting them, which could either be printed on the tile or perhaps there's a player who can place portals.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm imagining. Is that I think we need to figure out
So it feels like this game has tokens.
oh yeah. Seems like there's tokens, there's meeples, insofar as, that's what you want to call it. There's tiles. I think working out how the saving happens in a mechanical sense is quite important. Like
Yes.
in the version where it's the like simple version where you just need to like give each person like 3 little platforms that their meeple can stand on or something.
So those could also be represented with tokens.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be like moved to a safe place.
Yeah. But that's like harder to do to somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I
like I want it to be a thing that's quite like directly a thing that you do for somebody else, and maybe not even necessarily just facilitating them doing it themselves.
I think the alternative is that it could be way too easy if you're the swapper. Oh no, because people would stay on the tile when you swapped them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to need to swap the tile out from under them. It's done. um, yeah. Other things you could do, wake them up somehow.
Yes, that's tricky because does that then remove them from the game?
Remove them from the game. It's. I wonder if there is. I mean, this might just be a hat on a hat, but like, could you have it so that a player wakes up and then anything that's got their tokens on it is just removed? Like they stop, they stop inhabiting the dream. That would probably not be great.
No, and it feels too scary. I'm liking the like uplifting version of this, and I'm a little bit sad about the version where one person gets left at the end.
Yeah, we don't want that. Like, and I mean, with any of these games, like everyone wins or no one wins.
Yeah.
So it's about. So how would you give? So whether it's platforms or whatever, if I mean, I feel like the big reference, at least in my mind, maybe this isn't happening to you, we're a slightly different age and stuff, but I feel like the thing that's going unspoken here is Inception, right?
Oh yeah, sure. I've seen that film.
And in
there
Inception,
was a long period of my life where I was constantly referred to one of the actors in compared to one of the actors in it.
Oh yeah, that's true. You are less similar to that actor now.
Certainly true.
But yeah, like, so in Inception, like if you go into someone's dreams, you have to take your totem, which is what tells you if you're dreaming or not. Like it's something that's personal to you that tells you if you're dreaming or not. So I wonder if these platforms could instead be, a bit more abstract than just something you stand on to not get sucked into the bad dream, but maybe just something that like gives you solidity and comfort.
Okay. So does that suggest that there's different ones for different people, or are we just talking about like they're all like equal?
I think that's a really interesting question.
I mean, I'm a bit worried about going too heavy on the like too granular,
Yeah, I agree with you. So, I mean, something else I want to just clarify. Are these already on the board? How do they come into being?
I guess the simple version that I'm thinking, and this is only just because this is what I can think of based on what I know we have, but because players cannot directly interact with other players, I more or less, but there still needs to be a strategic mechanical way in which you're doing the thing. I more or less imagine it being the case that like you need to leave the thing on, they're not on the board initially, players need to add them, and if you add them to a space that is adjacent to another player, that player can then grab it. Or I guess if you add it to a space that person can access using their power, but then if one person's power is like flipping tiles, then that's kind of not as easy.
Well, flipping tiles, are we thinking that the tiles have a sort of forbidden game style good side and bad side? There's like a dream side and a nightmare side.
That is not what I've been imagining, but that certainly could be a thing. I guess I was mostly imagining that when there was a question of like an objective being to do with what's shown on the map. But then,
because I was sort of wondering where the difficulty or threat comes from in this. Like in the Forbidden Games, there tends to be a deck that you draw through, and sometimes you raise the threat level. It's the same in Pandemic.
Okay.
In this, maybe it's something different from that, but it seems to me that is a mechanic that kind of works.
Okay. So how about this? Every tile has like an illustrated side and maybe just a black side or like a void side. And void tiles can't really be used for most abilities. Like you can't swap an illustrated side with a black tile. You can't move on to a black tile. But you can flip tiles, or somebody can flip tiles. And perhaps there could be a thing where it's not quite so easy. So like when you flip one tile, you also have to flip the two that are adjacent to it, either in like the column or row, so that way, like, while you're generally going to tend towards flipping tiles from black to color, sometimes you're going to be flipping a color to a black.
I really like that. It also made me think, this is somewhat borrowed from the Forbidden Games, but it's a bit of a different take on it. Could maybe a player's powered up ability is that they can move freely only on void tiles.
Ooh, okay.
So that they can like slip through the void, but then it's hard for them to get onto the next tile. Maybe that, like, I don't know, uses their whole turn or something. I don't know. But you could have something like that, like a player who is able to interact with void tiles. Are we thinking that? Yeah, so I feel like this is the big question for me, and I think it's one that I want to figure out, is how do you get tokens to your other players, and how do you get them onto the board in the first place? Like, I understand that we want to, your goal is basically to put them where your fellow players can reach them, which is obviously like a relatively simple objective. But how do they come to be on the board in the first place? Because generally things you need to reach in the Forbidden Games have like a set tile that they belong to, for example. And that tile is always on the board at the start. Whereas in this, I think that wouldn't be the case, that the tile was always on the board at the start, but it could be that certain people's tokens belong to particular tiles. You just have to place that tile.
Oh, okay. Like, so a part of the game is adding tiles, like not just part of the game, but like an intrinsic part of the game is adding tiles. Yeah.
That was one idea. I'm just not sure at the moment how you get, it's not so much how you get your tokens to your fellow players, it's just like how get tokens.
Yeah. I guess, like, on a thematic level, it would be nice if there was something about like you need to kind of imagine them into being, which could be something as simple as like you need to get to a space that has the, like, imagine a token symbol on it.
Yeah.
When that's used, that tile is flipped to the black side.
Yes.
Because then, you know, in theory, that can be like refreshed to be reused, but it might be tricky. The other way
you'd want multiple of them, I suppose.
Yeah. The other way would be maybe like some kind of like betrayal style dice roll that's just like has a certain probability of working, but that feels like it's maybe a bit mean.
I don't know about mean, but I'm not sure if it feels as thematic as the idea that it's something that you have to make effort to do.
I agree, yeah. Like, I think it's fine to have chance in the game, but like a dice roll feels like it would be a bit sort of like less what's the word I'm looking for? Immersive.
Yeah. I quite like the idea that tiles are never removed, like they can just be flipped to their void side, so that potentially if you have a player with a void ability, they can still use it. And I think that also raises interesting questions about the potential for deliberately flipping to the void side, if that helps someone.
Yeah.
And things like that. But I wonder if we also need to introduce, a threat ratchet that also introduces randomness so that the players are working against the game a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true. We don't quite have a sort of lose condition yet. We just have a like a bit of challenge. Hmm. Well, maybe there is some way that tiles get removed.
Hmm.
Um, like I guess I don't know precisely what that would look like, but I don't know. Like, okay, pulling something out of my butt could be like the nothing, from Neverending Story, but like a a mechanic whereby like every certain number of turns or like every certain randomly generated period of time, like the rightmost column just gets wiped. And like those tiles can go back in a stack of things to be added, but the you are like you're racing against stuff getting removed.
Yeah, I like that. I wonder if it's just like every turn you flip a coin seems a little harsh, but do do something where you've got, say, like a 1 in 4 chance. Maybe flip a coin is good. Like uh
Yeah.
and everything on that column is everything on the rightmost column is lost.
And the nice thing about that is like I don't, maybe this would make it a little bit like maybe this will remove some of the punch, but like you then have the strategic ability potentially, depending on what abilities you have at the table, like to just make sure your right hand column has fewer tiles in it than everything else. Because we're talking about a map that doesn't need to be square, right? Like can be sort of amorphous.
Yeah, I mean it could just be a long straight line and you're only losing one tile. Like that is possible, but wouldn't necessarily be be optimal.
Yeah, like certainly if somebody has a sliding ability,
Yeah,
they can basically change one tile in one direction and can't do anything otherwise.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so thinking about the sliding ability, I feel like that has to work kind of the way, I can't think what bug moves this way in Hive, but like it has to be in consistent contact with the piece. But
mm-hmm.
what about like breaking the dream? What about having gaps? I guess you could slide something else into the gap to reconnect.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And
I just
again, we've got a lot of things on the table at the moment, so
Yeah,
maybe.
I kind of want to flag up that we actually have 15 minutes on the clock. So I wonder if we sort of try and do a roundup very
Uh-huh.
quick, just thinking about like, so you just summarize the game as quick as you can, and then we spend a little bit of time on branding, and we just kind of accept that this one was a big strategic game and we weren't going to get it all pinned down.
Yeah, okay. So we're talking about a cooperative game which takes place in a sort of shared dreamscape. Um, Different players have different roles and abilities, which always relate to the movement or like changing of tiles in a tile-based map. And you've got sliding, you've got flipping, you've got swapping, you've got portals. These are the options for what roles can do. The objective is for everybody to save everybody else. And the simple version of that is simply like offering a certain number of tokens of a certain kind to each person for them to like collect and be like saved. We have no direct interaction between players, so essentially you can't like pass something off, and you can't like move somebody else's token unless you're moving a tile that they're on. Um, but man, what else did we have?
I can tag in.
Yeah, sure.
So the tiles have some what we would call like a positive side and a void side. And most players couldn't interact with void tiles. We think there probably would be a player type that could.
Mm-hmm.
So and flipping void tiles back over to their good side can flip adjacent tiles as well, so that there's like the potential for kind of spreading danger and spreading difficulty. And there was some other stuff as well. Oh yeah, and that once a turn you flip a coin, and if that comes up void side, then you lose the rightmost column of your map. I guess you would have to agree in advance which column is the rightmost.
Yes.
And the lose condition, I guess, would basically be, yeah, losing your whole map or getting into a position where you can't all win, which I guess would also mean that if one of you was ever accidentally wiped off, that would be a lose.
Yeah. There was one other thing I was thinking of, and I can't remember it, but we oh yeah, there is no like set shape to the map, and everybody has the ability to add tiles to the map. But perhaps there's a limit on that. Like you can't just like add one tile to the right every turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I think this is a really radical idea. I can see that we haven't got like as far with this as we might have done with others. It's definitely more ambitious than our previous video episodes.
Yeah.
And maybe equally ambitious as some of our most ambitious games that we've talked about before. With our last 10 minutes, do we want to think a little bit about brand and identity?
Yeah, because we haven't, although we've gone into vibes quite far, we haven't really thought about like quite what it looks like, or like exactly what we might be looking at for brand.
Yeah.
I like the idea of illustrations being like tiles having more than just like a solid color, like having some kind of illustration, but it would probably be really quite abstract and or surreal. Maybe in like maybe with like perhaps even different styles across different tiles, but I'm sort of thinking about that kind of like Dreamtime Aboriginal illustration style, like I guess just based on the game I was talking about earlier.
I was definitely seeing something quite abstract and surreal, but also, I mean, one of the things we talked about off the top was we wanted like lots of different locations.
Yeah.
So I think I would want the tiles to sort of connect in some ways and be quite disconnected in others. And I wonder if one of the ways of doing that would be to kind of have either a unified art style and lots of different locations, or something more like a consistent location illustrated in a variety of different styles.
I want to shout out a Twitter account, which you've probably seen. I can't remember the exact name. It's like this band doesn't exist, and it tweets like AI generated album covers and like metal band and album names. And I feel like those AI generated metal album covers are, for me at least, what I'm imagining, a big like touchstone of what this might look like.
Yeah, I have written down AI generated feel.
Yeah, sure.
I will not have an AI generate anything that I make ever.
Hell no. But yeah.
But something with that kind of that
Get
deep
lost Google thingamy, Imogen.
That deep dream, that Dali. Like yeah. I totally get it. That stuff has a great, it does really feel like dreaming.
It's like at once figurative and like that you can't exactly pin down like where any one like object or thing ends.
And it doesn't have the details quite right. Like
yeah,
that AI still don't know how many teeth people have and stuff like that.
And it really sucks that like texture on clothing somehow. It just thinks that everything we wear is like super smooth and has no fibers.
So yeah, I think I have a sense of what it would feel like. And I think the box would have the same kind of feel. I love that kind of everything blending into everything else. We also talked about like some tiles having the possibility of matching them together to create a single image. So I think it would be quite good if you could have some things that like crossed over tiles. You know, it wouldn't happen often because of the way the game works, but like when things did match up, I think that would look quite cool.
Yeah, perhaps that could be like less like a figurative thing and more just like have 3 forest tiles, and forest just means like, yeah, it's kind of green and like rough textured.
Yeah. I think yeah, I like the idea of the visuals being like super kind of like computer psychedelic sort of yeah, just all that kind of weird, not quite right kind of imagery. I think that's what I would want for it. Um in terms of the components, we have two-sided tiles, we have tokens, probably tokens both that you need for win conditions, but also for portals. And you have meeples.
Yeah.
I quite like the idea of the meeples being interesting in some way. I just think that, games with great production values often have, screen printed meeples like in Root or things like that. I just think that looks cool.
Okay, crazy idea. What if instead of having meeples, the game asks you to bring something that's just like a thing that's in your handbag or whatever, and you use that to represent your character? Like,
I
you know,
really,
like it's your totem thing.
I really like that. I wonder if, I mean, this might just be way out there, but could it come with modeling clay and you make it yourself at the start of the game?
I mean that, yes, that's fun. I possibly like the um like random small item that's connected to you more than that.
Yeah, I think I do really like that. It maybe makes it a bit less of a pick up and play, but like,
Yeah.
we're not making this game for real. We're making a video about it.
Well, I mean, if you were playing this at the cafe, and you didn't have like things to hand, like everyone was people who didn't carry anything in their pockets. Like we've just got a little container on the counter of pieces that have been found on the floor and we haven't figured out what came there from.
You could also like include meeples, but also say like,
Yeah.
Why not use your totem instead?
Mm.
Like, there's no reason not to do both.
We need to do a name.
We
and I
do
don't know
need
how
to
much
do a
time we
name.
have.
We have 6 minutes.
Okay, we can do a name in
Here
that
are some
time.
things that I thought about. Hold on. I thought about oh my god, I did have something and now it's completely gone. Do you want to jump in?
Okay. I don't know. What's oh my
So
God, hypnagogia or whatever it's called. Um
I like that. The sort of shared dream location in Sandman is called the Dreaming.
yes.
Uh, Maybe lucid.
Mm-hmm. That's not quite right for me.
No, because it's not really it. The
Um
dreaming is also a bit uh derivative.
yeah. Something about like shallow, like like dream phase names.
I quite like dream phase.
Not dream phase, sleep phase.
Yeah, but it is just called dreaming, isn't it? Or yeah, shallow sleep.
Dream phase is sort of interesting because it
It
refers
phase
to
like movement.
yeah. Um phase dream? No.
Sleep phase?
Yeah.
I maybe like dream phase more. I feel like out of everything, I maybe like hypnagogia the most, but it doesn't fully do it for me.
No, I agree. I also strongly suspect there's probably already a game that's called that. um
um, I mean, I also want it to have something to do with being in a shared space, like dream space.
yeah.
Bit boring.
Uh
Um,
phase space. Dream phase space.
um, are there other words for dreams?
Um I cannot think of any.
I'm having a quick look. Fantasy, nightmare, vision, hallucination. A little bit boring. Maybe something with reality in there. Dream reality, dream the world, seeing as that's the phrase that was in my head. Just
Yeah.
dream world, or maybe like dream world and then the is small in the middle. Like
I'm into that. We can pick that. I'd like to somehow evoke the kind of cooperative and like save your friends nature what, but yeah.
could we call it dream the world, save your friends?
Yeah. Or like, yeah. Disaster dream. Something void.
Uh,
I
void dreams.
I think dream the world is cool. Mostly because you've written it in this cool thick font. Well,
it's perfect, and I will be taking no notes. Okay, we are literally about to run out of time, which we do not usually do, but I think that we've made it to the end. We also sort of recapped in the middle, but we can try and do like I won't try and do a visual recap, but should we try and sort of recap what we did?
Yeah, we could just do it in like the short pitch version, like I would do at the cafe, not necessarily like pulling out every single detail.
Yeah, go for it.
I would be like, okay, so this is Dream the World. It's very unusual as cooperative games go. You are all in a shared dreamscape and you need to save one another by like completing tasks, as well as each having a sort of private objective, which if you achieve kind of levels up your abilities. And the crazy thing about the game is it all takes place on this tiled map. You'll be working against the game as it tries to erase tiles from the map and leave you stranded. And your abilities relate to how you can move and change and flip tiles in the map to like advance your ability to save your friends.
Amazing. You can tell that you do this for your job.
Yeah. Man, I know that we do cool things quite often, but this one's really out there.
Yeah, this one is definitely a bit wackier than what we've done for videos before. I feel like, well, actually, no, because Dada Art School was super crazy, but in a different way. Like,
yeah.
Dada Art School was almost not a game. This is big time a game. This is more of a game than we really had the time to make.
Yeah, I'm now imagining like a group of people turning up at the cafe, like clearly recently took mushrooms, and they're going to play Dada Art School and Dream the World.
Yeah, we've entered into our hallucinogenic phase. So I think this video is going to be the second episode of September. So when next our listeners hear from us, it will be spooky season proper. But as it is, we've kind of just taken like a bit of an autumnal turn, thinking about dreams and coziness and strangeness.
Yeah.
And mushrooms.
Very latterly at the end there. Well, thank you as always, Georgia, for joining in with me and lending your incredible art skills to our
I didn't end up doing that much art. I did a lot of mind mapping this time.
Yeah, some diagrams, some mind maps.
Well, thank you, Miriam, for the prompt and for being the brains of the operation. And thank you, listener. We appreciate you.
Yeah, we love you, listener.
Look, if we're just doing this for one person, I still have no idea who that one person is because I know it's not anyone I know, which makes it even crazier.
So yeah, thanks again for listening. We will see you in a fortnight's time, potentially.
Yeah.
And happy Halloween. Chaka!
Caca.